You're listening to New Churches Podcast, a production of Send Network on newchurches.com. We discuss all things church planting. If you're looking to take your next step toward multiplication, you're in the right place. Newchurches.com provides relevant and reliable resources for church planters, church multipliers, and disciple makers. Our growing library features pastors, planters, and church leaders like Ed Stetzer, David Platt, Trillia Newbell, Christine Hoover, Dahadi Lewis, Trevin Wax, and many others.
Hey, we're here another episode of the New Churches Podcast, having a super discussion with some friends about evangelism in particular. We see evangelism has fallen on hard times, and if church planting is largely the gathering of disaffected or dissatisfied believers who want to be in a cooler church, we have failed at the task. We here in Australia, I was just with the group called Reach Australia. I'm recording from Australia. They have a great phrase. They want to evangelize new churches into existence, and that's what we want to do as well. So that's our conversation today. And we're going to talk about evangelizing the next generation. Our guests are Shane Pruitt. He's the Next Gen Director of the North American Mission Board, and Catherine Renfro is the Director of Evangelism for the same. They've both been involved in church planting and deeply involved in evangelism as well. So here we find evangelism has fallen on hard times in general, but we're also aware of some of the particular and specific challenges of evangelizing the next generation. So let's start with Shane, with what specific issues are Gen Z wrestling with that become barriers to evangelism? Shane, talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You think of the pandemic, going into the pandemic, through the pandemic. I don't know if we're allowed to say coming out the other side yet, but as you're navigating that, I always say this way, especially when you think of college students, young adults, teenagers, is really the pandemic didn't create new problems. It just poured gasoline on the problems that were already there. Because even statistically, Generation Z was dealing with anxiety and depression rates at a higher rate than millennials and Xers were even before the pandemic. So the pandemic just poured gasoline on that. So what you have now is you have a whole generation who are coming to the end of themselves at a much earlier age. They realize the world is broken, they're broken, and because they're coming to the end of themselves at a much earlier age, that's why depression rates are up and anxiety rates are up and suicide rates are up and ideation rates are up, all those things. But it's also, here's where my evangelist heart comes in. It's a great opportunity for the gospel because that's where the church can slide in, not with our politics that immediately turns the next generation off, not with our opinions, not with our agendas, but with the gospel to go, hey, you're looking for hope, you're looking for answers, you're looking for truth, but here's what we know. Hope has a name, the answer has a name, truth has a name. It's the name above every name, Jesus. And Ed, in the last 3 years, I've seen more young people, college students, young adults, teenagers get flat out saved in these last 3 years than probably the previous 20 years of ministry combined, because they are searching and they know the world's broken. They know they're broken. They've been told a bunch of self-help stuff their whole life. They realize the emptiness of that. So they are searching for something more.
Yeah, I think we feel that in the midst of the tumult and the turbulence of the day, we feel that people are, I think, rightfully more open. And we can look at historical patterns that when the world's on fire, when the world's in trouble, that's when people are more open to the good news of the gospel. So let's have, first Shane, and then when Catherine, just to jump right in, have you seen this generation respond differently thus far compared to other generations? I mean, you're both younger than me, but talk to me a little bit about that, Shane, and then just Catherine, just jump right in after he talks.
Yeah, it's interesting with Gen Z that there's an appreciation for boldness and conviction. Like, even if they don't agree with what you're saying, if they think you believe what you're saying, there is an ear there. So, I know we've talked before about gospel invitations. I've seen young people really respond to gospel invitations because in a sense, you are calling them to boldly respond. And so I know sometimes in past, a lot of times we do if you're going to give a gospel invitation, let's say like an old school come forward one, typically it's like, all right, everybody bow your head, close your eyes, pray with me. Hey, I do that. There's nothing wrong with that, whatever. But what I've been doing even in the last year, Ed, it's been fascinating, is I'll say, hey, don't bow your head, close your eyes. Heads up, eyes open. Here's what Christ is calling you to. if you believe God's calling you to respond this way, now's the time to respond. And students will just respond like crazy. So much so sometimes where I almost try to talk them out of it, because sometimes you'll have more people at the stage than even left in the seats with young people. And I'll be like, do you understand what I'm asking? It's okay to go sit back down. So it's almost like not in an overbearing way or a rude way, but it's almost like with especially college students and high school students, it's almost like you can't preach hard enough for them right now, because I think they're over fluff and puff. They're looking for spirit and truth. And I think when a person is bold and convictional, wrapped in kindness, it is grabbing an attention of a generation. I see it all over the place, you know?
Yeah, and I would add to that, that this generation, Gen Z, they want to know what truth is. They're hearing a lot of different things from different places, whether it's friends, social media. Barna actually did a study. I was reading about this recently, and it showed that the vast majority of Gen Z are actually curious about the Bible. And it said that 2/3 reported that they actually wanted to read more scripture. I think it speaks to their curiosity of truth, wanting to know what it is. And then when they decide for themselves what it is that they believe, like Shane said, they're bold to just to stand for that. So another thing that we see is this generation just being less interested in surface level entertainment. Like they want to really dive in to truth and scripture and find out what is the Bible actually saying.
Let's talk a little bit about this from evangelizing, engaging the youngest generation. We're talking mainly about Z here, or Z as they would say in where I am right now in Australia. So with because generationally we got, I'm Gen Xer. I'm going to ask you, put you both on the spot. Catherine, where are you in the generational spectrum here?
Millennial.
Millennial, of course you are. And Shane, what are you?
I'm a young Xer. A young Xer.
Right. So yeah, and I am not. I'm like right. If like a day later, I'd be a boomer. So we sort of represent almost. I'm an older Xer. He's a younger Xer, and then millennial. So for engaging, so let's make it more broad. And Catherine, go to you first. And you can pick whatever generation. So what advice would you give to millennials to engage Gen Z, to boomers to engage Gen Z, to Gen X to engage Gen Z? You pick one, and then we'll have Shane share some on others. What advice would you give?
Well, honestly, Ed, I would say no matter what generation we're in, the best and most important thing we can do is pray for this generation. I think we talk more about Gen Z than we actually pray for Gen Z. And so I would say for my generation, as we're getting opportunities to invest in students, praying for them, and then being intentional to really spend time with them and start conversations with them that matter. I think no matter what generation you're in, if we really care about them the way that Jesus does, then we'll care about their eternity the way that Jesus does, and be willing to spend time with them, have conversations that matter with them, and just keep connecting and sharing. One of the things that I've seen often is students, they don't just want an explanation of what it is to live for Jesus, but a demonstration, like modeling for them what it looks like to follow Jesus, goes much farther for them. So being willing to take time to connect with them, to bring them along with us, whether we're doing something ministry related or it's just inviting them into our everyday lives, for them to see what it looks like to follow Jesus and to be able to have those conversations with them makes a huge difference.
So let's continue, Shane, if you don't mind. Look with me, because we're Gen Xers. So let's talk some about how Gen Xers, because the cultural distance kind of grows. Gen Z to millennials, some cultural distance, but Gen Z to Gen X is a pretty big cultural distance. What might be your advice there?
What's interesting with Gen Zers is that whether right or wrong, millennials were banged on so much, right? I felt like millennials were the generation that people made fun of so much, or it was so highlighted so much. So I think when you saw Gen Zers as they are getting older, whether their parents are older millennials or their older siblings are millennials, a lot of Gen Zers go, I don't want to be like that. Not necessarily like their older brother or like their parents, but like the caricature of the millennials. So almost in a sense, what's fascinating is Gen Z is almost an overreaction against millennials and what was characterized as a millennial generation. So what's interesting is sometimes you see Gen Z identify more with like Xers, or they identify more with their parents sometimes. I mean, with their grandparents more than they do their parents. And so I think there's a unique season that we have an opportunity in right now, as I say, is don't discount those seasoned saints in any ministry for next gen ministries. You know what I'm saying? So, a lot of times people say senior adults, but we don't like to use that term anymore. So classics. So, hey, don't discount that classics generation in your church when it comes to reaching young people. Because often when we go, hey, well, we want to reach these young people, we think, oh, we got to get somebody a little older than them, or, young families to invest in them. Hey, great. That's awesome. Younger leaders or their parents or young families. Great. But don't discount those like grandparents in your ministry, because a lot of times they're maybe retired, so they have open calendars. Sometimes they have disposable income, so they can really take students out to eat and spend time with them. And most grandparents love their grandkids, and most grandkids love their grandparents. So I know even the years I was a student pastor and a college pastor, when we invited the senior adults to come in and they saw and caught the vision and they began to hang out with college students and teenagers, they quickly became some of the favorited leaders in that group. So here's what I really believe about Gen Z, because they care deeply about authenticity, is they're really not looking for cool leaders. They're just looking for real and authentic ones. And so I would just say, be yourself. No matter what your age is, no matter what your dress style is, just be yourself. In fact, if you're trying to be something you're not, meaning you're trying to dress like them, talk like them, act like them, then they see right through that. And it comes off cheesy, it comes off inauthentic, and they reject that. I even think, and I don't know, it's much different than whenever I was a young person. When I was, I didn't grow up in church. I got saved at 21, and the person who reached me with the gospel was in his late 60s. I am a jeans and sneaker guy. I think Brother Ivan Carr came out of his mother's womb with pleated Dockers on. We couldn't have been more different, but our common ground was the gospel, and that he loved me and he spent time with me. And I think those principles still hold true today. So just be you with a heart for the next generation.
Yeah, I think, I sound a little skeptical, but partly because that's a little counterintuitive. I mean, it's kind of a principle in my field, missiology, that people tend to become Christians without crossing over a lot of boundaries, right? They, Spanish people, Hispanics tend to reach Hispanics, and young adults tend to reach young adults. So I think that I hear that, and I'm tracking with you as far as like relationships in church. But you're actually saying that in evangelism conversations, you're actually seeing cross-generational make a difference. If I could press in on that a little bit from both of you, I'd love to hear from both of you. Tell me about that.
Practically, I would say in the discipleship space,
okay,
I think it doesn't matter how old you are. If we stick to true evangelism, I still believe this, and I think it's been true for a long time. The most effective person at reaching a student with the gospel is another student that has a heart that beats with passion for Jesus, and that same heart is broken over the lostness of their own generation. I really believe the most effective person to reach in a college student is another college student. The most effective person at reaching a teenager is another teenager. I think default-wise, we tend to think, their parents would be the most effective person at reaching them with the gospel. And it may be true when they're younger, but I think the older they get as an unbeliever, if they become a teenager as an unbeliever and a college student as an unbeliever, I typically think the most effective person is another college student or teenager.
Yeah. Catherine, what would you add about this? How would, if that's true, how do we help mobilize the next generation to be those who might share the gospel? Gen Z sharing the gospel with Gen Z.
Absolutely. I think one of the best things we could do is help them to remember their purpose. Like, why do they live where they live? Why do they go to school where they go to school? Why do they work where they work, or the sports teams that they're on? Why are they there? It's not a coincidence. It's because God has them there their whole purpose is to know Jesus, but also to make him known. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest regrets that I have in our early days of student ministry is we did not do a great job of equipping students to actually go out and share the hope of the gospel with their friends, where they went to school and where they worked and on their sports teams. We did a lot of, hey, invite your friends to church. We're doing this evangelistic event. Bring them. It was a lot of come and see, but we didn't equip them to go and tell. And I think if we help students see that not only can God use them to make an eternal difference in the life of one of their friends, but he will use them if they're simply willing and available, I think it's a game changer for students. Just talking with a student 2 weeks ago, and there's 2 words that sort of came to mind as I was just listening to her talk about life, her relationship with Jesus, how things were going at school, and it was purpose and influence. Students want to live with a purpose, for a purpose, and they want to have influence. And so for us to be able to show them, like, hey, your purpose is actually much greater than getting good grades or being the best on your sports team. Like, your purpose is actually to be a part of what Jesus is doing to make himself known. You could leverage your life for influence that will matter for eternity rather than just these other things that don't matter at all. So I think helping students see those could be game changers for them.
Love it. Love it. Super helpful conversation today, Catherine Renfro, and your insights are always appreciated. And also, to some degree, we'll take Shane's good influence as well. So, so Shane Pruitt and Catherine Renfro joining us in our conversation today. Thanks for listening to another episode of the New Churches Podcast. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the New Churches Podcast, brought to you by Send Network. If you like what you heard, take a few minutes to rate and review us or share this episode with a friend. It's the best way to show your support. To find more reliable resources to start your new church well, visit newchurches.com.